Hi, welcome to my channel, The Machine Learning Engineer. Today we have another video on the series Microsoft Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning. And the topic of today is again Copilot Studio, Copilot agents, and I will show you today how to connect to your personalized Copilot agents using the different SDKs and APIs that we had available on Microsoft. In Microsoft, we had different options. Each of them had their pros and cons, and this allow us to extend the functionality of and the use of our Copilot agents. You probably know, you are following my channel. We saw already how to use, how to create and extend the functionality, the connectivity of our Copilot agents using NCP protocol or OpenAPI REST interfaces. Also, we saw how to even personalize the flow, the conversational flow, etc. But today the idea is let's think in the scenario that we have an application which want to use one of the agents that we have available and deployed into our Copilot Studio and in the 365 ecosystem of Microsoft Word. Usually Copilot, usually no, the fact is that the Copilot is quite well integrated on the 365 ecosystem, and through the internal APIs that we had available, Power Apps, Power Platform, everything is quite integrated. And if you want to deploy the agent, for example, into SharePoint or into Teams or anything that is available on the 365 world, is quite easy, it's pretty straightforward. You don't need to define or create service principal accounts or register applications. You don't need to use SDKs. Everything is properly integrated and you practically don't need to code anything. In this case, I'm just going to show you how you can use anything that you have deployed in your Copilot Studio, but this time using external channels. How we can connect from an external application to our agent and use it, and like it we were inside the 365 world and working with Teams, for example. We can use the same agent that we had published into a Teams channel. We can use it from an external application. We will be doing a demo in my local computer, which try to simulate a real scenario and essentially creating kind of a bot which is interacting with the different agents that I had available on my Copilot Studio subscription. The agents, we will not enter into how create these agents. I already had explained this. They are agents which connect to a SQL database using different connectors, custom connectors. One of them is OpenAPI 2.0 Swagger API, and the second one is using an NCP server with streaming HTTP streamable protocol as transport protocol. So these two videos are already available on the channel. We will not cover them. We will just see on this video. I will demo how to use them from an external application. This means that we will need to create a register applications which allow us to use the different agents via either the DirectLine chain API or service, which is the all Azure Bot Service, or using the library Microsoft agents. Yeah, Microsoft agents, which allow us to interact directly with the agent. We can authenticate at the same time. This is the second thing I want to show you to the agent or to the Azure infrastructure using either your user. You can log in into the application using your own credentials, and with this you will be able to access to the agent if you have permissions on Copilot. And the second use case will see how to use the agents via the Azure APP service. Here I have prepared a small architecture with explain everything. Later on I will publish all this stuff. There is another couple of use cases. One is as well how to interact with the agent via an auction, which is the iframe. So how to publish or embed our Copilot agent into a third-party application. And the final example connected as well with Copilot Studio is how to use the Retrieval interface available in Microsoft Graph, which essentially is using is Copilot Retrieval API, which essentially is using the Copilot infrastructure and the Copilot generic agents, not the particular ones that you have personalized, to do semantic search among the resources that you have available in your 365 subscription. This is pretty interesting stuff. While we can search for information that you had available in the SharePoints that you had access to in your OneDrive, or even in the files that you had available, or even if you had right to use the web search services that are available and connected to your user and available through the Copilot Studio, Copilot infrastructure. We will cover these 4 scenarios. Everything is prepared in 4 different interfaces, which allow us to interact with the different Copilot agents, which are configured differently because obviously of the different authentication and channel that we use to interact with the agent. We are using in the local environment again a Django server, which essentially acts as a connection point with the backend infrastructure, where we have the agents. These agents are obviously in the Power Platform in Microsoft. So we have a server, Django server, in my case running in local, which is trying to simulate an application that you had available on the site, even in a virtual machine or in a service in Microsoft, Google, or Amazon, whatever, or even in your data center. So at the same time, the part of the Django server setup, we also create templates to interact with the 4 different options. We will not cover as well the CLI. This is something that I just prepared in the meantime to test the different functionalities that I want to show in this video. My name is Juan, an assistant engineer with more than 30 years of experience in the IT sector and the past 10 years dedicated to the AI and ML space. So let's start. So let's review a little bit the infrastructure. As I said, and the architecture. we have our browser. In our browser, we are going to display the different templates that we define in Django. Django will act as a server, a backend server from the user perspective, and in Django we will have the different definitions which connect us to one side via direct iframe to the an agent in Copilot Studio, and then on we will just have an HTML page which embed the iframe, and this iframe is showing us or rendering the interface, the UI of our agent. This is one of the options that we had available in Copilot Studio, and this will be as well one of the use cases that we will show here. The second one is using the agents SDK. This one is a second option, or second use case. In this case, we will authenticate ourselves using our user versus the Microsoft Intra ID, and this authentication give us the rights to, or not, depending how we had configured it. It allows us to use this agent. First of all, we authenticate against the Intra ID. If we have a user, we authenticate with the conventional user and password and second factor if you have it defined, etc. Once you are authenticated, we get access to the bot, and this bot is using the agents SDK library to connect directly to our Copilot Studio agent. So this agent is running, is already configured. We are not going to touch them. I will show you what you had to configure in your Django server in order to get access to this. What are the steps that you need to do in order to get access to the agent via this protocol. The third use case is the DirectLine API. We interact with the agent via Azure Bot Service. The Azure Bot Service is a quite well-known service. Is very mature. We are already in version 4. It was a service that is running for a long time in Microsoft infrastructure, and the only thing that we are doing is connecting our agent to the service, and then we can authenticate our application, our local applications versus the Azure Bot Service. Once we are authenticated, we get a session token, and with this session token we can start to interact with the Copilot Studio agent. The bot service interact with the Studio agent. Similarly, we just send or redirect the messages that we get from the user in the front. We redirect them to the Copilot agent, and then on the bot service is pulling every 1200 milliseconds the Copilot Studio agents API. There is an endpoint with these activities. These activities we use is to post messages and also to pull answers or to pull responses, as I mentioned, every 1200 milliseconds. This is the way that we will interact with the agent via the bot service. Again, the bot service here is acting as a wrapper, and then we use the interface that is already defined, quite mature. We authenticate versus the API, and we use the current endpoints, the same endpoints that we used before with the bot service, to just send information and collect responses from our agent. And the final demo will be the Microsoft Graph API, how we can use the 365 Copilot SDK to via the Microsoft Graph API how we can access to the Copilot infrastructure as backend, and how we can use a Copilot agent that is defined as an ephemeral agent, and we can use this agent to do semantic search among or across the information that we had in our profile, or the information that you have access to in your 365 profile. So for demos, I have other prepared, but it's a very specific case for external users using the external API. We will look at this in a separate video. I don't want to mix too many concepts. This is enough complex for this video. We will probably spend a lot of time explaining all the situations. Okay, so let's go to the first use case, which is where I had this, 1 second, blah blah blah. This one is channels. So let's see the simple one, which is this is my Copilot Studio. Let's see the more simple one, which is the what is here. Let me 1 second. Yeah, is the more simple one. Oops. Let me 1 second. Sorry, it's here. Well, let's take a look to the first and easiest one. We will start from beginning to end in terms of the complexity. The easiest way to deploy your agent, or at least an interface to your agent, is just creating or using the embed iframe embed functionality. To get access to this, you need first of all to set up your agent with go to security, authentication, and use the no authentication. This way, it's true, it's open for everybody. We can set up other controls, but not in the agent itself. It's how this agent is going to authenticate to the Microsoft backend. And then setting up this with no authentication, this means that anybody can access to, so everybody can access to this agent. We don't require any authentication to the user, to the front user, to authenticate. It's true, again, I will show you now on the demo, we can set up for the channel in between your application and the agent other authentication and encryption mechanism, but to access to the resource itself, we don't need authentication. This is key in this kind of access. Set up this as a no authentication to access to the model. Once you have this done, you can go to channels, and in channels you have you can click in web app, native app. You can see here all displays, all this site. The first line is 365 authentication, so is when we had authentication the setup there, and then on this is just by default is the authentication that the Copilot agents use. You don't need to do anything, and then on it will use your user in Teams, Microsoft 365 Copilot or SharePoint, and if you have it will deploy it, or you will be able to use this agent if you have that authentication in these channels automatically. just using your user and your credentials, logging into 365 dashboard, you will be able to access if they were published in channels where you had access to, or SharePoint sites. In our case, for accessing this, we go to other channels, to web app. Oh, come on. 1 second. Yeah, sorry, I had my license, but I don't know why from time to time it's popping up this trial station. But as I mentioned you, when you can go here when you have no authentication, and you have here this code that you can later on embed in a third-party application. This is allowing you to interact with the model itself. Let me show you the code a little bit. But the code, we will look at the code probably at the end with all the let me, oops, 1 second, where I have this, here, sorry. So here I prepare DirectLine Copilot Embedded. Let me prepare DevTools. It's something that is probably quite interesting, so I have prepared this page. This page is not authenticated, but what I mentioned you before is you can create your authentication before you get this page. You can authenticate your user with your own authentication. Once you have authenticated your user with authentication defined in your application, you can get access directly to the embed code. Let me refresh just this, and then on we just see here how we are interacting with the embed chat. This is, you don't need to do anything, you just insert into the HTML page the code that you copy and paste from the from Copilot Studio. You can see here we are getting and interacting with our with the Microsoft infrastructure. Now you can simply start writing here list tables of the database. So just to remind you, these agents are connecting to the database via, as I mentioned at the beginning, to a database via either an OpenAPI interface or via NCP protocol. In this specific case, if I don't remember wrong, this is using, let me take a look, the SQL server, the NCP server. So again, this is covered in another video that is already published on the channel. So you cannot find it, and you are interested in how I create this connection, and also the container which is running the NCP server with the HTTP streamable as a transport protocol. Write me on the comments on this video, and I will point you out to the correct video. So the agent is published, and then the agent is connected to this SQL server. That's why I'm asking some questions about, can you describe I don't know, this one. Yeah, as you can see, this is the easiest one. And now, and with few lines of code, you essentially can look at the embedding here in our templates embed frontend. We can look at the script. Let's copy, or 1 second, I will look at the channel just to look at embed. and here go to definitions, look at embed, no context false, yeah, on click. Exactly, I have the embed in my embed URL. This is part of the, let's check where I have this environment sample. You have your embed here in your HTML code. By the way, I don't remember. I put it exactly. I put it here. So in my URLs, this is part of the configuration in Django. Just when you I define just the embed entry point or route as a template, and here, if you don't have this by default, is going here to my URL. Just you can see it's pretty simple. The URL that you need to access is in the code is a little bit yeah, but essentially here you had the full HTML, but essentially what matters is this in between double quota, the source. And then on here I had a much more complex HTML, but essentially we are looking at the same URL. So here I just copy the URL. You can define in your environment this variable is taking this by default. This is obviously not a best practice, but well, it's just for this demo is good enough. From the demo, from the code that you have here, you just simply copy the source and include it. In your application, it may differ because this is just the way I prepare this HTML for the demo. Okay? That's as simple than that. This is the simple way to you access to your application. And again, here is this front. This front is running on the Django server, so you can personalize here the authentication. So the access to the Copilot is via HTTPS, so it's an encrypted channel from the Django server to the Copilot, your Copilot infrastructure. Okay, so now let's move to the second use case, which is DirectLine. DirectLine is a where it had this? No, this not. Let me show you. As I mentioned you before, is the channels. I have it here. No, yes, here. DirectLine. DirectLine is a mature service, if you want to say that. It's already in the SDK version 4, so it's something that is working. We have their features. There's well known how to use it, how to interact with the backend. Essentially, we have a key which can allow us to access to the API, and then on there is different entry points. One is to get the session token or the conversation token, and the second one is to retrieve activities. One is to send the activities API. So we have here in our later on we will see this. We have different endpoints. One is to get the tokens, conversation tokens, to initiate a conversation, and then on to send a message to the bot. So this is what we write on the on our user interface, and and the other one also to the conversations activities is the function pull is just to pull in the responses of the of the agent. At some point, if the agent is requesting authentication because it's necessary for something that the agent is connected to, the agent is going to trigger a card, what they say BND Microsoft Card Authentication. It will send this special request to the in this case to the Django server, and we had a specific function and methods which will take the necessary information for our environment and send it back to the agent via the DirectLine API to authenticate the agent versus this component that is requiring authentication. Okay, but again, everything is going through the DirectLine API. Is, as I mentioned, is quite well-known interface, which very mature and established. I will show you now what you need to get from that authentication and how you can configure. So if we go to our agents, we have the NCP server agent, and in this case is also an agent which is connected to the database using the same NCP server. If we go to settings, we have our security defined as a authenticate with Microsoft. This means that we are going to use the credentials that of the user that was published in this agent, so in this case my credentials. And what you need to take or to use is essentially this. You need to have the web channel activated, and you need to take one of these tokens. These tokens will allow us to access to the API, and just to authenticate the user. One second, because I think yeah, when when I was talking about this, I remember it that is I was wrong. Forget what I say up to now. The authentication, again, yes, we need to copy our DirectLine token. This is to access to our to the DirectLine API, but at the same time we need to define create an application and define manual authentication. For what? I remember when I told you when the agent need to authenticate itself versus another components that require authentication, you need to have an account, an application registered with some credentials that allowed the agent access to that resource. So for that you need to define an application. We will look at this here and then configure these values. Let me take a look to or show you how to set up the application itself. Here, app registrations. So we have here the tenant, yeah, the 007. Okay, so we can look at all the, yeah, we have here, you need to register an application in your intra ID. Is that one, which one created, and once you have created, you need to define First of all, you take note of your client ID, your tenant ID. These two values are very important. The same of the token ID that you took from the channel. And once you have these two values, you note it down, you go to authentication, you define a new URL, type web, you choose that one, and you introduce the redirect URI of the DirectLine authentication API. This API, this URL changes depending on the area of the globe where you are located. If you are, I'm in London, in UK, so the one I had to use is this one. So apart of that, you need to create a secret. You create a secret, and you also create, you give a description, you give an expiration time, and you note down the value of your key. And finally, you need to get access to the Microsoft Graph in files, sites, and users. Something similar to what you see here. This step is not absolutely necessary, but it's a good practice in order that to facilitate the access to the DirectLine interface. So recap: create a secret, note down the key, create a redirect URI, and consider type web, and consider or replace this with the one suitable for your location, and the one that is supplying the service in your area. And you note down as well the client ID and the secret ID. Now, if you go to the agent itself, here we copy as well in the manual authentication the URI, service provider Microsoft ID version 2 with client secrets. This is the client ID of our application, the secret that we have created, and you have here this URL to do the token exchange. This is the URL that we will use to do the single sign-on of our agents. As you can see here is login Microsoft Online. This is our tenant ID, and then on OAuth authorized. No? So here, using our client ID, the client ID of our registered application, and the secret we have created, we authenticate ourselves case that the agent requested that. At the same time, you need to define the scopes, OpenID, profile, and offline access. And these three, offline access is only necessary because I'm working in a local environment. In case that you are working in another application, but I think no, it's clear. Yeah. If you are creating an application, for example, in a container, you will need as well offline access, profile, and OpenID. So this is the configuration of your service principal, and here you have the web security. Take note or note down this. This agent, instead to use the NCP server, we are using the connecting to the same database, but in this case we are using the let me remember, we are using OpenAPI version 2 connectors. So here again, this is different server, different interface, but the final database is exactly the same. This is, I only create two different agents that are connecting to the same database but using different connectors. And then in order to show you different agents connecting through different channels, I need to use as well different agents. No? Now let's go to the API. So let's close this here. We have DirectLine. Let's open as well the DevTools here. I recommend you to use the DevTools because in many cases it's quite interesting to understand the whole flow, and this way you can observe here what's going on here. So when I press F5, we refresh the page. We basically connect to the DirectLine here to this connection. We just send we get the we are sending we are getting the page from my server. Here I'm doing a post to the DirectLine token with my key, and this is returning me with the key. Which key is the key that you copy from exactly here, from this place. This post has a token bearer which is using this key that you have here, and then once this is responding you with a session token. This session token comes with an expiration, and after that you start a conversation with you send another post to the DirectLine API. In this case, you need to send the token bearer that you get here from this request, and you start a conversation. This conversation returns you, as you can see, the conversation ID. That is exactly the one that we have here. And once you have initiated the conversation, you start to do the polling to activities. As you remember the code, here you have DirectLine. We have here sending message to conversation activities and pooling. The pooling is every maximum 1200 milliseconds. And from here, again, case that we need to authenticate is because we have an attachment with this vCard. Let's see, you later can take a look to the code. Now we can list tables in the database, and then let's take a look what is happening here. You can see here where here we are doing the pool, and then once we had a conversation, we are starting to pool the activities endpoint with the Waterman is the stating the conversation that we are using. Can you describe, for example, DBO? You see here we are sending again a post, and then on now it moved to the second step on the conversation. And then, well, you have this option, is working pretty stable. Is an interface that is really well known in Microsoft. So it's something that is ready, is available in your agent. So it's something that you definitely can use, and as you can see here, it's pretty easy to use. Later you can take a look to the code. It's pretty straightforward. And then obviously here I make a very simple the connection. It's practically when you just log in the page, is just taking from the environment the token, and well, everything is defining on my environmental variables, and I just initiate the conversation automatically. You may want to do this differently, but well, here you can see that everything is working through this interface. It's quite easy to integrate in your application. Now let's go to the third example. Is the DirectLine. DirectLine is using, let me find out where I have the information. This not here. Agents. So we can use the 365 package. So Microsoft 365 package, we had two interfaces. This is the one that allow us to interact with the agent directly. So you had the information here. We had three different languages. All this information is included on the readmes on the repository, so you can access using C#, Python or TypeScript, and essentially we have three libraries: Copilot Core, Copilot Beta, which is essentially an extension, so you can access directly with Copilot Core only, but if you want to use some of the latest, still in beta, but yeah, you can use it because, well, as you can see here, it's been still in development, but yeah, it's working pretty well. This allows us essentially to access to our server, our client, sorry, using this interface and accessing. No, well, again, I make another mistake. Sorry, is this one? So there is two which are pretty similar: Agents for Python and 365 Copilot. 365 Copilot is the access to the Retrieval interface, Copilot Retrieval interface, which allows us to use the Copilot infrastructure to do semantic search across the resources that we have access to in 365. And then on we had Agents for Copilot. It's the one that we are going to showcase right now, which allow us to interact with agents not only in Azure AI Foundry, also Copilot Studio. So also this library is in different languages. We are going to use Agents for Python, and as you can see here, it allows us to access to agents in different channels. Sorry. Also including, as I mentioned you, AI Foundry, Semantic kernel, and other technologies available. Pretty easy to use as well. And here we are gonna use, in this case, this is the agent SDK direct call, the blue road. So we will authenticate with our user versus Microsoft Intra ID with our credentials, and then once you are authenticated, you go through the agents SDK library using the agents SDK, and you access directly to a published agent. If you to configure this, you need to have some environmental variables. So your connection string, your ID, I will show you in a second how to get this. In order to authenticate yourself, you need to create as well a service principal. Is that one, if I don't remember wrong. Let me 1 second. Tag. Exactly. So path. No, the big one. CB1. Sorry, CB1, that one. You need to create as well your exactly another service principal. Well, essentially you don't need to create it because the Copilot will do it instead of you. You go to once you have created your agent, you as well go, well, this agent is using tools, the same tools here, we don't need to carry the CP server. We go to settings, we look at our security, we have authentication with Microsoft. This connection strings is the connection strings that you have defined to access to the server, but here you can go to take the parameters of the service, the application that this agent has registered in IntraID. You can go to metadata and you take these values. This is the environment in Power Platform, this is the tenant ID, this is the agent app ID, and this is the schema. This is pretty important because obviously every agent, depending on the tools, the topics that you have defined, all the configuration, the knowledge that you have uploaded or connected to the agent, the agent itself had a different schema. There is a general schema and then on the extensions. And then on these are some of the values that you will need to configure later on your environmental variable you want to access using the agents SDK. So you note down this, you need to have the security in Microsoft Security, and then once you note down that, you need to go to channels and going either to web app or native app, it doesn't really matter, you note down this connection string. Okay, here you can see here you had the schema, you had the version of the API that you are using, and you have here your environment in Power Apps, and you have here as well the complete URL that is necessary to access through the through the backend, through the backend in Power Platform. So here you note down the metadata of the agent, this connection string, and after that you can configure the values in your environmental variable. Here you have the connection string, the environment, it can be production or development depending on the environments that you had. It had to be in my case a production agent, so this means I have published, I only had one environment, but you can have multiple environments. Your tenant ID, you take it down this from the metadata, the agent app ID as well from the metadata, schema from your metadata. Here the scopes, I will show you what you have to configure as well in the scope. You need to have access API rights of this service account or this application. You need to grant these permissions on the application. I will show you right away, API platform. So if the first time, if you don't have the API platform set up, you need to configure it. I had in the documentation how to do that. And then on a part of granting access to this API, you need to grant access and using the different scopes, these 3 different scopes. You also, this is not necessary, this is only you decide to use this code here, that is a testing a test script I create just with the Python library, and then on the M365 cloud production and the type of agent, it is publishers, draft, etc. This M365 environment ID is your environment ID that you get from, let me show you again, from here. Environment ID, tenant, agent, and schema. Connection stream, from where I show you the scopes. This is only you use the Python screen, cloud production, and type of agent published. Okay. So now in the application, when you register the application, let me find out where I have this. It's not here, here. So this is, if I'm not wrong, the right one. This is tenant ID 19B1, exactly. So authentication, you need to provide access or create for this specific ID. This is the ID, this is the same ID that you have in your agent metadata. Exactly this, the client ID. And then on you go to this in your intra ID, and you set up single page application SSE here to your local entry point, the URL where you want to redirect the applications once the login has finished successfully. And then on you can use as well this case because you can also define this. This is a specific case when you are using a local environment, because when we are logging from our local environment, we need to define not only the redirection point, also some points for the authentication process, because during the authentication we send back some information back to the application which is hosting the application which is trying to authenticate using your user and password. We will look at this right away. We don't need to configure secrets here. Remember, if you configure a secret in an application, you make it private. This means that it will need it to provide in your environment a secret and a client ID. The client ID is the one that you get from it, and you will need to provide as well tenant ID, which we already had, and also the secret. In this case, the application is public because we are authenticated using our users and password and our credentials. And in terms of API permissions, you need to create the Power Platform API. So this means that you need to have available here in API my organization use. You need to have Power Platform API. Again, I have on the documentation how to create access to the Power Platform API. In case that you don't have this already created, it's just running a command in your Azure Cloud CLI or in via code. You can create this platform. It's pretty simple. It's just run a command, and then once you have this created, you can delegate the permissions to Copilot, and then you need at least Copilot invoke, This will allow us to interact with the agents that we have in Copilot Studio. I also include admin actions, but for the purpose of this video, you just need Copilot invoke. Okay, so once you have that, we have as well our agents frontend. Well, we have that query token. We will cover this in a second. And here we are just using some of the this script is not used, but here in our URLs where is that? We had the entries AP graph, DirectLine graph, AP star embed agents SDK. So we get the HTML, we got all these parameters, and we just simply inject them into the front end. The front end you will see here is quite straightforward as well. It's just a script which is managing the authentication via the library in JavaScript MSAL, which is Microsoft Authentication Library, and then we are using this library to do the authentication. So here you can see here the how we define the environment, and then we just simply, once we authenticate ourselves using the our credentials, we will just simply interact with the browser, with the agent. Sorry. Here we are using that, and once we have that, we just simply interact using something pretty similar, by the way, to the interface that that DirectLine is providing. Okay, so let me 1 second prepare the environment, because I want you to see how we authenticate. We have here defined, we can remove that. Let's remove that as well. So I'm going to copy this. Let's copy that. Let's remove the browsing data just to not be authenticated probably more than 1 hour, because last 24 hours probably clear now. So now let's move to this. So here we can sign in. I'm gonna use my user password. Now it's 2 second factor, and 1 second. And now once it's used, we sign in, and it's automatically starting the conversation. And here I get the prompt of my agent. So let's click here F12 as well. I would like to, I missed this. Let me, well, we can interact with the agent right now. List tables in the database. Oops. We send, and then on here we are using the acts, which are other APIs that we have defined, other entry points that we have defined. You can see here, and then I'll describe table DBO registration CSN. So we are using the Axe endpoint, and then on once the database. Here in this agent, we also had a second agent. Let me show you that. So it's a little bit specific, this agent, apart of the conventional tools I have using the NCP protocol. Apart of that, I have created a sub-agent which I named Agent Trading, which just essentially is containing some PDFs as knowledge, and then I will ask as well my agent that answering me some questions about this book. And then I think I have something here. Let me showcase this. For example, I'm gonna ask that to make like trading, to make a summary of this book, and then I'm using again instead to use, here is accessing to the second agent. You can see here that we are accessing to the Axe API. So we are defining this start the conversation and Axe. These two entry points are specifically used for this agent and agent SDK API access. Okay. And here we just define the route and we render this template, which essentially is using that. So okay, so this is the third example. Let me now prepare the final one, which is essentially the DirectLine. Access to Microsoft Graph. Here we are going to use as well the authentication, the same authentication I use in the agent SDK direct call, and once we are authenticated using the Microsoft Authentication Library token, the one that we are getting here, we go to the Microsoft API and we can use the Copilot Retrieval API. This access as well allow us, let me show you, I think I have it here, I mentioned you some moments ago, is this API, and essentially we are using here the graph. Microsoft Graph is a bridge in between the 365 world and Azure, and then we are using here one specific API, the authentication we do it versus Microsoft Graph Microsoft account API, but then we need to define, we use a specific API among of the multiple ones that we have there. The one we use is the Retrieval API, which is the one that is using this library to essentially interact with, for example, the information that you had available in SharePoint, in Microsoft One, Drive, in files, or in other sources. Even sources can be with resources that you have available through the Beans engine, but these resources have to be connected to your Copilot Studio or to your Copilot Studio subscription, if you want to say that. It's not that you are gonna do access directly to your OneDrive subscription. Is that we will use it will use your Copilot Studio subscription to get access to the information that you have in your profile or you have access to, for example, SharePoint sites or SharePoint servers. To configure this access, we have another endpoint, and we need to set up as well as service principal. In this case, one second, where I have this here. So for this one, I think I'm using exactly the 3800. So you need to have an application register. In my case is that one. So you need obviously to configure as well in your environmental variables your client ID, so you will need to use a specific variable for this client ID. The tenant is the same. In your authentication you use this, you doesn't need, because this is for the agentsdk endpoint. Here you just need to set up a web single space application redirected to the local host 8000 graph, which is my endpoint. This is going to be the endpoint where the authentication workflow will redirect the flow itself. Once you are authenticated, you need an authentication key, because this is a private application, and you need to define the Microsoft Graph accesses that you want. There is multiple. You can go here to Graph. You can use either delegated or not or application permission. If you use delegated, this means that everything that is authorized to use here, it will be accessible through this connection. If not, you can specify this as a application permission, but this is just for the scenario. So sorry. When you use delegated permission is when you are interacting with your user and password, so you are going to do an active login, and if you use application permissions, you just simply create you grant the permissions, and you will need to use your secret certificate and secret and your client ID and secret ID to in the background service or in the application, but without using a sign in of a user. So this is using the credential that you define here, and the credentials of the service principal or the application, and here we use delegated permission. This means that we are gonna use our login and the permissions that we have because of our profile in Intra ID. So in this case we are going to use delegated permissions, but in case that you want to use this as a service or an application without user interaction, you will have to use these other permissions. Case that we have delegated permissions, you mostly, in both cases, you will need to grant. So you will need to choose them, and a part of that you will need to grant the permissions, and from time to time you will need to refresh this. So recap, you will need to create an application. You take note of your application client ID, your tenant. You create a URI to redirect the application after authentication. This is only for the case that you are going to do delegate authentication. You would use the credentials of a user. If you use you don't want to use the credentials of a user, you define a secret for the application, and then on you define to which applications in which modality you want to get access through Microsoft Graph API. You have plenty of them as well. So here we have as well Power Platform. You can define as well to some applications the permissions directly, but I recommend you to do it directly with Microsoft Graph, which is going to be at the end the central point to access everything in Azure. Okay, so once you have that in your environmental variable, you just define here your tenant ID, your client ID. As you can see here, I define a second variable, your graph scopes, what I want to access here to Copilot packages, to the sites, SharePoint sites, to files, all the files that have available through this user, and also any external item. This means web resources mostly, of the user that I will use to authenticate. Okay, so now let's go to the demo. I will this is the graph. Let's copy that as well, and then on we will let me browse, remove the deleting browsing data, last hour, clear now, and now graph is a no run graph. So here now it's gonna ask again for authentication. This process is pretty similar to the one we saw before. It's asking me for authentication, and once I authenticated, it's gonna sign it in, and then on here I can choose the source and also the how many resources I want. So let's ask what is glue. Here I'm gonna access to this SharePoint. Well, essentially I just have one SharePoint, and then on in my SharePoint I had multiple folders. One of these is some of the I have some information about generative AI, legal topics, medicines, etc. So I'm gonna ask what is glue, and then on come on, I forgot to do this as well. I wanted to show you. Let's ask here, so here, as you can see here, we are accessing to another endpoint. What is, let me check, for example, exploración de miembros. And you can see here we are accessing through the endpoint Retrieval, still running, and you can see here, well, it's checking exploración miembros inferiores. This is this PDF. I asked, well, it's in Spanish, but well, it's, as you can see here, we are using essentially a semantic search to find across the different information that we have available in our another document. In medicine, this exactly some of the files that we had here. It's another way to use it. Just we are using the Copilot infrastructure to access to the information that we had available in our profile or through our profile. In terms of the front end, is pretty similar to the others. It's HTML with some JavaScript, which is essentially accessing to DirectLine token, retrieval endpoint, in this case to some of the specific, more than the specific, here we are just, you can see here in URLs, what we are using from DirectLine token, we use this method, and from graph retrieval endpoint, this essentially is to interact with the two APIs. DirectLine token, you go to the endpoint, it's just we use it to create to request the conversation token. As you can see here, we use the token of our agent, the one defined for the DirectLine service, and in the case of the retrieval endpoint, we use these two interfaces. One is the retrieval, is how to interact with the retrieval interface, and here is as authentication, and then on run the retrieval with the query, data source, accept token, and max results. This is exactly what we have on the bot, and here just the authentication. Okay. Client for token, exactly. Yeah, in this case it's just graph style authentication. Yeah, well, this is something I use essentially to avoid somebody not using the formal process to, also the formal authentication workflow. We have here the main of our front end, of our Django server. Essentially, we execute for the command line, and this is gonna take the Copilot agent settings, the settings of the server, and if we don't pass any command line, we just simply execute the server with the 4 parameters. In settings, we have all the configuration of our server. This key, it is not used it, but allow a host, installed application, middleware, the templates, BSGI, database by default, password policies, locale, time zone, etc. This is the configuration of the server. We will not enter too much here. ASCII, BSGI, different ways, and the views. So views is a specific URL. So we import all the views. These views are essentially helpers to do the authentication in some of the scenarios. So we have, this is for external, this is something that I didn't explain, it's for another video. This is a start conversation, ask question. This is for the agent SDK, agents SDK interface. Remember, here in the URLs we are defining all the paths. We have here the admin, DirectLine, graph. Here what we post in graph, what we render is this template, graph frontend. Here we have these two that used for the agents SDK. This is for DirectLine, this is for the embed, and here as well this is what we are rendering in DirectLine, what we are rendering in embed, and what we are rendering in agent SDK. This again, this is for external identities that we will not show it in this video. Well, pretty much the rest, they are text, agents console, agents, well, some of the text I will do it, no need to explain it. Later, if you want to go in some more details, take a look to the code in the repository. Okay, and that's pretty much all. We cover a lot of stuff now, it's really a lot. So I hope that you got more or less a clear idea, all the possibilities. This is non-conventional channels to access to your agent. We have plenty of there that they are conventional. In this case, those are the non-conventional ones. So here you had the ones that are available for any agents by default, them as well. This is other channels, this is custom applications and third-party channels, and also you have there. I have planned another video where we will cover some, probably, I don't know, Telegram or WhatsApp. I will check what to do, and maybe we will take a look how to embed it with one of these services. We'll see. For the time being is enough. We were already more than 1 hour and a half in this video. It's more than enough for today. So thank you very much for watching the video up to this point. I hope that you find it interesting, useful for your job, for your training, for whatever reason you're watching this video. And if so, just give me a like, subscribe to the channel, consider becoming a paid member of the channel. This way you have access to the full code, plenty of the code and notebooks, practically 90% is free of access, but only but for paid subscribers I had what I mean projects, end-to-end projects for the most complex topics. And also you can help me to continue with this project, sharing this video with other users or your colleagues, friends and colleagues, and also doing comments. Again, if you didn't understand something or you want to get some of the background videos where I define the connectors, etc., write me a comment on the, grab me a message on the comments of this video, and then I will try to respond you as soon as I can and to the best of my knowledge. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.